Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, it's 4th of July here, and I'm recording inside, so I apologize if you can hear some noise from my family. They just went outside to the front to do some sparklers, and that's because we're way in the north woods of Wisconsin where it's still raining, and fireworks were canceled tonight. So my truck was too loud to record in, so this is where we're doing it. Now, the satellite imagery from this afternoon was pretty impressive. We saw several things that really caught my attention. One, very well predicted here, the scattered nature, but the very heavy precipitation falling from some of the storms that are over parts of the southeast. You can also see the kind of ring of fire configuration, the ridge-running storms that are going over the ridge that's parked right in parts of the Mid-South. And some of these storms today were quite impressive, like the one that moved across parts of Illinois into east central Illinois and eventually over to Indiana. And I'd just love to see these images right as the sun sets to get an idea of how tall they are by looking at the shadows. A lot of isolated severe storms that are in here in the plains. We do have a severe thunderstorm watch that's out for parts of Montana, and that's actually associated with a much deeper, more vigorous low that's coming through parts of Washington here. So right into this area is where we're really keeping an eye on. But as you look at this, what I want to do here is I also want to show you a great website. I know I've shown it to you in the past, but just want to remind you, blitzertongue.org. Go visit it. It's free lightning data. It's fantastic. So if you're not going to get to see man-made fireworks tonight, we always like to talk about where the natural ones are going to be. So we still see them here in the southeast, coming up on the southwest monsoon and along that frontal boundary that's stretched right in through this particular area. Now, looking back over this weekend at precipitation, we can see there was quite a bit of rainfall for a lot of places that really desperately needed it, but we're still waiting on rainfall to come to places that we still need quite a bit of. I'm thinking about the eastern Corn Belt. I'm thinking about parts of the Mid-South, more of the Mid-Atlantic. But some big storms were rolling through the midsection of the country, and we're going to expect to see quite a bit more of that. But again, that map I've spent so much time focusing on over the last several weeks here. I'll show it to you again. This is the last 14 days of precipitation compared to normal. Now, this has only got data on it through the 3rd. It's always a day late due to quality control. But again, your eye is drawn to a few important areas, like this part of Texas through the Mid-South, the eastern Corn Belt, and then as you get here into this section of the western Corn Belt. Those are 3 areas I'm really honing in on. We've had a very active southwest monsoon, and just to make note, this is typical, okay, to just not have much precipitation in the west. And I should have drawn this circle a little bit farther down into Colorado. I expect improvement, continued improvement for parts of the Mid-Atlantic, the Southeast, and the Carolinas. We're going to see here in just a few moments where we're going to see some improvement in parts of the Midwest as well. But let's complement this graphic with the newest soil moisture map. Now, this goes down to 40 centimeters, so that's about 16 inches. We can really see where those pockets where there's not much soil moisture, where the deeper drought exists, which means we can't just cure drought in these areas with one good rainfall. It's going to take multiple events to really come through and wipe out the drought. And I could just keep circling these really dark areas, but you can see them pretty clearly here. So that's an important note to make. And that's likely why the latest U.S. seasonal drought outlook and this was released last week, but why they're still saying that drought is likely to develop here, and where it's already taken hold, they expect it to persist. And that's because without routine return of moisture, it's going to be hard to kind of break the drought in summer, especially because the primary mechanism for rain delivery here is going to become from thunderstorms. And they move fast, and they also are hit or miss. So let's keep this map in the back of our minds. I do think, though, that if I was able to redraw this whole ring of fire configuration, it's the greatest risk will be in the Mid-South to Texas. That's the area that I'm most concerned about right in through here with having drought persist. And here's one of the big reasons why. Today's 12Z European model, you can very clearly see the corridor over which we expect to have the most active thunderstorm activity. It's running right into this direction. I'll explain why in just a few seconds. But with a ridge that's starting today here and then moving over toward the southern plains in the coming days, that's really just going to keep this area too close to the kind of the center of that large area of high pressure. So there's no good lift in here, and it tends to be capped. There tends to be too much heat in the mid-levels of the atmosphere to make storms just pop, and that's why the models are keeping it dry. What happens is running all along the periphery, there's convergent flow. and the jet stream blows over the top of this, pushing the storms into the very moist air that's coming up, from the Gulf of Mexico. So we kind of put all those things together, and you get this particular graphic. Now I want to do just a little bit of explaining on why I'm seeing what we're seeing and how it's much different than what we saw in June. Because throughout June, the ridge sat right here, somewhere, between Oklahoma and Arkansas and Missouri. And the jet stream, now this was very La Nina-ish, had this trough that was just off the west coast. So the flow came over the top and it went around like this. As we talked about all last week, we had a ridge of higher pressure that sat between the Hudson Bay and Greenland. See it there? Now, what's important about this upcoming forecast is if this was the position of the high in June, we want to know where it's going to be in July. I think it's pretty clear that if you keep it in place, those regions that saw drought development, rapid drought development in June, are going to suffer from the same thing in July. And what kept it there was primarily this trough, okay, the blocked up pattern to its west, and then this ridge that was in place right in through here. So if we look just quickly in the near term, this is where we see the pattern doing. So you see the main ridge axis still sitting over parts of the lower Mississippi River Valley in the Mid-South. As we play this forward through the middle of this week, the end of this week, getting into the weekend, where's the ridge move to? You saw it. It started here, and the models, the ensembles, are bringing it back. There's still strong flow coming into a trough, but this trough is not as deep. Runs up over a ridge here and then dives into that deeper Hudson low we talk so much about over in this particular area. And what we see here in the forecast is where that ridge just wants to stay. Just notice as we get out there to like Monday the 11th and getting toward the 12th, 13th, and 14th, the ensembles are just keeping this pattern in place. Now, once we get past, the 11th, 12th, 13th, so we get out here, more than 10 days from where we are today, we could possibly start to lose the northwest flow that delivers the thunderstorms. We now have northwest flow that's become so steep that it brings in too much dry air into this area to sustain all of the storms. So what that means is this next week's worth of precipitation is going to be critical if you're in this area and seeing such dry weather. Unfortunately, this pattern does not bring much relief down farther to the south in Texas. So before I get into some of those details, I just want to talk about, has anything big changed overall other than what you just saw in the height pattern? And I'm just going to come back to ocean temperatures as they're such a key indicator. Okay, we've seen some warmer water surface here. We expected that. Remember last week we looked at how there wasn't much cold water beneath the surface to sustain the strong upwelling. Well, we've seen some warmer water surface here, but our La Nina, it's still very much there. We've seen the erosion of the cooler water along the west coast. This warmer water here keeps pushing into it. And as we've stated a lot, that means that the ridge axis will tend to push toward that warmer water because it's going to make the whole jet stream go farther to the north, and therefore the ridging tends to be centered more over the Great Basin or the Rocky Mountains. So thinking about that La Nina, it's still there. Look at these trade winds. I mean, they're smoking in this area. And because of that, the Southern Oscillation Index rising once again. So we had expected it to do that. And just a reminder, in the Southern Oscillation Index, you need it to be a value of 7 to be considered kind of base state La Nina. We're up here in the 15 to 18 range. So this is clearly still representative of those very strong trade winds. So what am I going to kind of boil this down to? Well, let me show you some climatology. This is what the 500 millibar, so that's about halfway through the thickness of the atmosphere. This is what the height of that pressure level looks like. So this is our trough ridge pattern. So if you just kind of find a line and then follow, that's the typical flow of the atmosphere in the month of June. So this is going all the way back 1991 to 2020 climatology. So the ridge tends to sit somewhere here, okay? Now, as we transition from June to July, see where the ridge moves? I know it's subtle, but the ridge moves west, June, July, and it gets bigger. And what typically happens is that gives us more of those ridge-riding storms in this particular area as long as the ridge does move west. So when I saw the ridge moving west, we talked about at the beginning of this video, and I looked for reasons why, knowing that we have a La Nina, knowing that the MJOs collapsed back into null space, knowing that the Hudson low is getting a little bit deeper, I have to just say that a lot of the behavior you're seeing right now is very just close to climatological seasonal transition, moving the ridge to the west. What's interesting about all of that, since we're talking about these longer term or longer time scales, is I want to show you some other just really important data here. And I want you to go do this on your own if you ever get a chance and you're interested. NOAA has a phenomenal website called Climate at a Glance. If you just Google Climate at a Glance, you'll be taken to this site. What I've done is I've clicked on regional and then time series. And then I came down here and changed some of the boxes. So we're going to look at precipitation over a 3-month time period ending in August. NOAA's got data going back to 1895. I want to plot all of it. So I put 2022 even though we don't have that data in there just yet. And I'm looking at the primary corn and soybean belt. I also came over here and said, would you plot a trend from 1970 to 2022? And this is what you get. Now, when you look at the data in the background here, it's that trend I'm most concerned about. Because what it shows me is that June, July, August since 1970 have had a steady upward increase of about 0.4 inches per decade. So that kind of boils down to about, just roughly speaking, 2 inches of additional rainfall compared 1970 to present. You can see some of the big years on here like 2012 or 1991, 1988. You know, these really dry summers for the Corn Belt, they show up there, but so do the really wet ones like 2009 and 10 and like this one here in 2015. So all of those show up. When you see this trend, we start to ask some questions like, okay, what's driving the increase in moisture? Because we now are starting just to see it. And many of us, myself included, thought that this would be the summer that would give us another big spike downward because of that La Nina. Well, here's part of the story. The first thing I'm going to show you is for this bounding box. See it right down here? I used some of the ERA 5 data to plot dew point temperature change. Now, it's around an anomaly, so it's comparing it to the 1981 to 2010 average. But if you just put a quick trend line on this, you can see that it's been increasing. So if the dew point temperature is increasing, that is a metric, a measure of the moisture. We could look at it that way, or I could just come up here and say, well, actually just plot total precipitable water during summer for that area. And I got a bit of a slow internet connection, but there you go. You can see that we're much wetter. There's more moisture in the air, more transport of that Gulf moisture in place. Now, if that's the climatological trend, okay, and we know right now that the ridge is moving west, hence the northwest flow, the ridge riders, and the better precipitation, we want to know if that's going to continue. Because if it continues, it saves a crop. That's it. It is going to save this problem, especially right in through here, but likely not down here in the southern plains and parts of the Mid-South. It will undo the drought development in this area. So what is the most likely scenario? I'm going to go back to the European model, which we called into question last week, and show you the latest data run here on July the 4th. Now, this is basically all the way out to August 3rd. That's a 30-day time period. The model has been very consistent with how wet it's supposed to be here. But you can start to see these streaks of green. That would indicate that northwest flow. Here's the southwest monsoon, and you can kind of see areas around it that the model's picking up on being drier. But as we expected in last week's video, I didn't think it was going to last. And you notice as you get out there, going from like July 10th to August 10th, there's areas starting to reappear in the model favoring drier conditions. And it's kind of coming to some of the original ideas we had at the beginning of the year, way back in spring, thinking that the east and the southeast was going to be much wetter than what we were going to see in the central plains, the Midwest, in this area. Now, what would make this very wrong? Keep the deeper low here. Keep the ridge over the Rocky Mountains and the northwest flow having a trajectory like this. Now, it's subtle, but I'm going to tell you something. If the northwest flow comes in like that, it brings in too much dry air and we shut down the storms. But if it just runs along a trajectory like this, that tends to allow enough Gulf moisture to make it far enough to the north that the storms just come running down through this area, making this all way too dry. But that's what you got to see. You got to keep that ridge farther to the west if you're in this area getting drought. By the way, that does keep on the southwest monsoon and it does return heat to the west. But that's something, of course, we haven't seen all summer for much of the West. In fact, today, it's got to be one of the coldest 4th of Julys I can remember for California. I'll show you those temperatures in a second. So this is kind of the story we're seeing. The temperature side of it. Let's go look out there again, that same time period. We can even stretch this out further. Let's go all the way out to like August 15th. So the July 15 to August 15. You can see the placement of the ridge and where it's attempting to keep the warmest conditions. Why does it look so cooler here? This is largely due to cloud cover and precipitation. All right. So that's our latest evidence we've got from the most trusted model that we have. And we're just kind of trying to explain why it's showing what it's showing and show some of the caveats or the potential areas that could go wrong. Now let's get into the near-term forecast. Heat, we got a lot of it in the central plains of the United States. And all of the storms are kind of running around the edge of that heat. In fact, this evening, the All Hazards weather map kind of shows us that story. There's all heat advisories except around St. Louis, where there's an excessive heat warning. There and through here is our flood watches. These are all red flag warnings, and this is a severe thunderstorm watch that's here in this part of Montana. That pattern is going to be around for a while. You can just expect to see the ridge that's here. See the flow coming around it? Look at that ring right there. That's just going to move this direction over the next week. So that ring just comes over the top like this, and that's our corridor right in through there of active storms. That's what's going to shift. By the way, this is Bonnie. Remember, Bonnie actually started way over here, cut across the Gulf, and is currently sitting here. I believe it was upgraded to a Cat 2. I'm not really too much concerned with Bonnie right now, but there is nothing really redeveloping out here in the Atlantic. One of the things going on there is that over the next few days, a lot of Saharan dust is in that particular area. So while we take a bit of a break in the tropics, I will tell you that once we see the MJO reset a bit to give us really good rising motion over this part of Central Africa, we'll start to see those easterly waves come off again. But that may not be until we get to the second or maybe the third week of July before I start to see something like that showing up again. So I just wanted to keep you folks that are considering what's going on in the tropics, keep an eye or listen closely as we talk about the MJ over the coming days. Okay, our severe thunderstorm look. Now, this is for the rest of this evening here on the 4th of July. We're watching northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, and then this part of Montana getting into the western side of the Dakotas. Tomorrow, you can see the ring, right? It's right in through there. Enhanced risk on the 5th here and here. And then day 3, it's that same configuration from Montana all the way to the Carolinas. We can look quickly at one of our forecast models. Let's get this up to when I'm recording there it is, about 8 o'clock this evening on July the 4th. You're just going to see this on repeat. Scattered convection in the southeast, southwest monsoon, storms on lingering weak frontal boundaries here. Ready? So this is going into the overnight hours tonight on Monday into early morning Tuesday. Now, I want to keep an eye on this overnight tonight into tomorrow morning. The models have hinted on developing some sort of a squall line feature that may ride on the top of the boundary layer tonight. We called it elevated convective event. Keep an eye out here for this, but it could deliver some rain to parts of Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio that need it. The good news is watch. Going into Tuesday, where do the storms come back out again? That same boundary. Do you see it right in there? That's getting to Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. Might have a lot of nocturnal storms out of this. And we just keep seeing it run over that ridge in this particular area. Isolated convective events, big storms in the northwest. But that's the main corridor I'm watching. And again, I'm focused so much right here just because I'm watching that area so carefully given the depth of the drought that they've been in. From there, let's go do our multi-model analysis with the GFS on the left and the European on the right. Skill scores are back at advantage European over here on the right, up about 3% over the GFS. We've seen through Tuesday and into Wednesday this week. Why don't we stop it right here on Thursday morning? Lingering frontal boundary. It's in both models. Indiana needs this rain desperately. Illinois needs this rain desperately. That's Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening. See the stalled out boundary right in this area? Now we're getting into Friday morning, afternoon, and evening. Just stall out there and rain. I just want to see that so badly for some of these folks in this area. As we get into Saturday morning, afternoon, and evening, the front starts to sag a bit farther. Then we get here into Sunday. Next round comes over the top. See it there? That's Sunday morning, afternoon, and evening. Storms just run the periphery of that ridge. Let's even go out there into next Monday and then Tuesday. So you can kind of see the models. You know what's kind of fun to do here? If I just started over and played a bit faster, you can now see those weak boundaries on which the storms form and how they just slowly press to the south. We stitch it all together. This is what the European model is calling for the next 7 days. Pause it. Take a close look at this. This is what the GFS is calling for. European, GFS. They both picked up on the pattern pretty well. I'm impressed overall. But due to the nature of thunderstorms, the individual location amounts being forecast by these models are going to vary greatly. What we can do is this. You know I like showing you these maps. It's the next 10 days, probability of getting an inch of rain. Okay, probability of getting an inch of rain over the next 10 days. There's our corridor. If I do this the other way, say what's the chances of getting less than half of an inch, we now go back to that area of major concern, which is right down here. Sorry, let's fix that back to the 12Z run. Take you out to 10 days, sorry. Right there. So you can still see there's a 50 to 90% chance that this area sees less than a half inch of rainfall. And that's right where the ridge is going to sit. We need to move that ridge out, or like I said, bring in some tropical moisture from the Atlantic or the Pacific to undo this. As we finish up this video, by day 10, notice the trajectory here. There's the ridge. Flow's coming in, and it's coming in at a more steep angle. This would indicate cooler air and drier air coming in as we work our way toward the middle of the month. And that's a big reason why when we look out there fully into the week 2 time period, which gets us out to July 18, you see some drier conditions here with wetter farther to the south. Notice that. That's because at that particular time, watch the temperatures transition. Ready? This is the next 5 days. I'm going to transition you out here to day 5 through 10, which gets us out to the 14th. Now watch. The model's been pretty consistent with this over the weekend. Transition the heat west. See that? And that ridge stays in place right here. But there's more heat in the west. Cooler, drier air is expected. And what you get out of this is a change in the dew point. Now watch. The dew points over 70 are contoured. Dew points below 32 are also contoured, but that's just dry air in the mountains. Now watch. As we go forward, all that super humid air that's going to fuel those storms in this area, dew points over 70 through Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. It just sits there. Now, as we go out into next week, do you see the dry air trying to push in? Whoops, sorry about that. I don't know what I just did there. There we go. Coming in here. Look at that. And as that drier air works in, it's got one more last hurrah. Looks like next Tuesday the 12th, but there's another big push of it. So if you bring in all that drier air in a much deeper trough, yeah, the model's going to show you a drier signal. It's in both the GFS and the European. Okay, from here, let's talk about temperatures, and we'll just do a quick international update and wrap this up. Monday's highs, we've already experienced these cold in the West Coast compared to normal, but quite pleasant. Tuesday's another scorcher. This is why they still have the heat advisories out. There's Wednesday, getting into Thursday and Friday. See how the heat just stays here in parts of the Mid-South to the Southern Plains. This is now going towards Saturday this weekend and Sunday. The next wave of heat comes in while cooler air exits to the east. But as you saw just a few moments ago, that whole pattern, really starts to just change itself up kind of in a big way here. I've got these temperatures somewhere. Maybe here we are. You can see that after we get past day 10, the eastern part of the country sees a much deeper trough while the heat builds to the west. Last thing I want to point out for you here would be temperatures across the planet. So we still have a bit of a heat wave coming into this part of Eastern Europe. So we got some high temperatures still around Ukraine, Russian wheat belt. Important to note here that see all the cool weather that's moved through India into Pakistan? That's because the Indian monsoon has advanced forward in a big way. It's very wet here. I'll show you China in just a few seconds, but pretty cool here as we get into winter in Australia. Finally, very warm. Look at central parts of, like right here on the Bolivian Ridge down here in South America, quite warm. So their winter has gone over quite warm as well. But let's do this and also look at, here, we'll just open this up real quick. Let's go look at the precipitation pattern for that area as well. So I'm just going to go to my website very quickly. There it is. So notice, see the Indian monsoon just cranking in through here, very wet compared to average. Much of Europe has a drier next 10 days, and that includes parts of Ukraine, which saw big-time heat recently and is still going to see more. We're still dry along the Yangtze River, but we're wetter in the North China Plain and wetter in parts of the Manchurian Plain. And this is going to be an area, right in through here that I'm going to watch carefully over the next, probably the next 5 months. This is where we're expecting to see a lot of activity pick up, and that's going to kick off these easterly waves that are going to be critical for upcoming hurricane season. Okay, I appreciate your attention today. Hope you're all having a good 4th of July, and we'll talk to you again on Thursday. Thanks.